And I think the child-centered approach to education, the individuality is very important. And that's the richness of why we love homeschooling, isn't it? It's the thing that we get to focus on the child and help. And so, one of the loud cries from our research of parents in a local community is that about 20% of them just really would love to see a healthy mentor for their kid. They feel like their kid's lost in the system in some way. And I was fortunate to be in a school system where in my elementary days, where we were in a small town, and teachers were able to step out and give us extra work. And I think that's what we're seeing, what I see with homeschooling, and my grandkids and the kids in our community who are involved in homeschooling. They have this sense of this enthusiasm for the future. I think that's contagious.
Welcome to Homeschool Talks, a podcast by HSLDA. This is a show about all things homeschooling, from practical tips to inspiring stories and everything in between. You can find show notes for this episode along with our other Homeschool Talks conversations at hslda.org/podcast. And if you want to be the first to know about new episodes as well as upcoming guests and topics, sign up for our email list using the link in the show notes. We're so glad you've joined us today, and we hope you enjoyed the program. Here's your host, Jim Mason.
Hi, I'm Jim Mason, President of Homeschool Legal Defense Association, and this is another episode of Homeschool Talks, where I get to talk to interesting people who also have an interest in homeschooling. And today my guest is Dr. Terry Linhart. He is the Associate Vice President at Bethel University in Indiana, and he's also the founder of the Arbor Research Group, which has done a lot of interesting research. So, Dr. Terry Linhart, welcome.
Welcome, Jim. And it's an honor to be on this podcast with you. I appreciate the work that you're doing with HSLDA. I've met some of your staff years ago at the Christian Leadership Alliance, and then it's been our privilege to be a sponsor of the National Leaders Conference every year.
Yeah, thank you for that. So, we had our National Leaders Conference last year in Ridgecrest, North Carolina, and Terry was there, and we're having it again this year in Nashville, Tennessee, and he's going to be there as well on behalf of Bethel University. And that's an interesting topic because Bethel University, as well as several others, are actively recruiting homeschooled students. Tell us about why does Bethel University have a particularly strong outreach to homeschooled students?
Homeschooling in our region is very strong. It's as you know, strong in every region of the country. And in particular, I think it's our Christian values, our stated values that we have that really appeal to a homeschool family and parents. And then our ability to match creative education with local homeschool co-ops, and also we even host a co-op on our campus. So you can walk across Bethel campus and see college students and students in K through 6, I think, there. And I think that's expanding even in the next year, our involvement. So it's a stated value for the university.
So one of the questions that homeschooling parents often get asked, in fact, almost always get asked, especially by people who don't know much about homeschooling, and that is particularly relevant to a university community. What about socialization? Do the homeschool graduates that you get at your university need like a remedial class in socialization?
I know that's the common question, isn't it? Well, we would tell you that homeschool students walk on our campus and do quite well in all levels. Athletics, because as you know, many co-ops figure out a way for that to happen, and STEM majors, they do quite well, definitely in the performing arts and in ministry. So we have not seen any sort of hiccup there in adjusting to a campus, and that we're not a large university helps as well. We're probably school about 1,200, and so that fits really nicely with a full range of activities and support services, and yet a small enough campus feel that they feel right at home.
So in addition to your duties with Bethel University, you founded the Arbor Research Group. What is that?
So I did my doctorate work in education at Purdue and studied short-term missions as a form of education. It was fascinating. And about 12 years ago, our InterVarsity Christian Fellowship heard that I had done a couple of large, complex projects across many states, and they called and said, we're not sure if our manuscript Bible study method is very effective. Can you help us evaluate that? And we did that project and then helped them with another program evaluation. And then another large missions agency in the country called and heard we had done that. And I didn't know how I was going to match this project. It was a very large project. And I went to one of my mentors and I said, Bill, how do I handle this? And he said, well, you need to form a group that can do these kind of projects. And so I recruited a group of people and we branded, and this ministry paid for all of it. And then we get to the final moment and they decide not to do the project. And so I'm sitting there going, okay, Lord, I'm praying, here I have this thing that clearly your hands are on. I didn't go out to seek to create it, and I don't know what to do. And then about a week later, maybe not even that long, a Christian school called and said, I hear you do research for nonprofits and ministries. Can you help us with our Christian education? And then it's just been 9 years of continual growth and helping various entities with a lot of projects. And I have now a group of about 12 people in the group that I've seen do research, and we're privileged to come alongside and study all sorts of things and provide customized research for their leaders. Usually it's executives, vice presidents, and presidents. Yeah.
So what kind of research have you done that might be of interest to homeschooling leaders across the country?
Yeah. So one of the things that we did for the school was obviously a market research. So this is a very common one for a ministry to say, we need to know our people. And that could be people who have gone through a program, for instance. What are the outcomes of the work we're doing? What are the potential people who'd be interested in this? So like a parent, what are the needs of parents? One of the projects we did was we did 4 national studies on various types of parents across the country and what they need. And in particular, we were able to research non-church parents who had either been in church at one time or weren't ever in church. And what is it that they want? What is it that they desired from from a church and from a local group? And that was a fascinating project in that. And so in another group, we had parents get into an online group for 3 weeks, and we studied them kind of a day in the life of a parent, if you will. And we had some questions, but we asked them every day to upload a short video of what that day was like for them. And so we had 36 parents from across the country, many of them not churched, and they were talking about what was it like to raise kids. And so out of these studies, we're able to learn, and because we all have doctorates in this area, we're able to ascertain some things related to those who create curriculum for children and for young people as they adjust what they want to do and meet the needs of parents.
A pressing question for our times is on the hearts of many parents is, how do I transmit my faith to my kids? And that's a big reason why a lot of parents choose to homeschool. Any insight into that from your research?
We did a fascinating study 2 years ago in the South related to this issue of teens pulling away from the faith. And one of the things that we discovered in this, and it's a fascinating study, you can get it through a group called Movement DFW, and they authorized the report. And one of the things we did when we studied it was to say, okay, we have these teens sitting in church on a regular basis, but what we know from research is that over time, many of them, though they look like every other teenager, some of them, a certain percentage of them, a large percentage of them may pull out of the church when they leave high school. And so that's a great concern of how to help parents raise their children. One of the things we did was we interviewed the teens in the youth group. We asked them to list their 6 closest friends and their 6 closest adults. And then we asked them to identify which of them were strong Christians. And then we asked them a series of questions related to their own spiritual life, how often they were praying, how often they were worshiping, their devotional practices, and so forth. And what we discovered was that in these youth groups, there were teens attending church on a regular basis, but who had no Christian friends and who had no Christian adults, like zero. Their friends were not related to the church. Their friends were outside of having Christian adults speak into their lives. And those, not surprisingly, were also the students who were starting to engage in prayer less frequently. They were starting to engage in spiritual disciplines less often. And one of the things we discovered is that the students who were thriving, who were growing in their Christian faith, not only had parents who were Christians, but they also had friends who were Christians. They also had adults they could see and emulate. They had Christian adults in their lives. And I think one of the things is my takeaway of this, and research has continued to show that growing in the Christian faith is a relational thing within the community. So if you want to transmit the faith, famous sociologist Christian Smith said, if you want to see what a teenager is going to end up in their Christian life, look at mom and dad, look at the adults in their lives. I think this close-knit church community is a powerful factor. And within that, there are intentional relationships in small groups, in Christian, in church, children's ministry, and in youth ministry. And for me, as a former pastor of a church, what it's done is to not just assume that just because someone's attending a church, it can even be an adult, that they're growing in the Christian faith, that they're having Christian relationships, but to make sure there's an intentional opportunity for them to build relationships with others who are peers, and also others who are other Christian adults other than mom and dad. I think that's significant. Maybe my youth ministry background's coming out there a little bit, Jim.
Well, it is an interesting question of our time, and I know you probably are familiar with Barna research and the surveys that he does, and the data that comes out of those surveys is somewhat alarming. I mean, amongst young people today, kind of leaving the faith of their fathers.
It's interesting, Jim. One of the things we found, and then there's another book out recently that Ryan Burge did, and even the stuff that David does at Barna. A lot of people who are out of the church, about a third of them, 37% or so, are still interested in coming back to the church. They kind of just get out of practice. It's not that they can't articulate some sort of religiosity or animosity, but there is this warmth to the idea of, I might be interested in that again. They just need an invitation and a community. And it's the community that I think is the loudest thing that I've learned over the last 3 or 4 years in the projects we do. The community of the church is a draw, or it's a repellent. It feels warm and inviting, or it feels judgmental and repelling. And that not only community, but also the teaching. The teaching is something we want when we go to a church, to peek in the door. I really need to learn and grow. But also if the teaching doesn't feel like it connects with my life, or it feels judgmental, and there's, as we know, aspects of the Christian faith that has a little bit of a confrontation to it, if you will. But how we talk about that within the loving community is really important if we want to reach out in our communities.
Another pressing topic that sort of bears on this issue, sort of 2 points that I've been fascinated with recently, is sort of the demise and decline of institutions, formative institutions that help us. The institution molds us and models for us virtue that we then, because we're part of that community, they're sort of the gatekeepers for how we mature and grow into virtuous adults in both a Christian and a non-Christian context. And then the fracturing of our relationships and communities with the advent of the iPhone, for example. And, kids today are, and sadly, I mean, I get this report. I don't know, you probably have an iPhone too. I get this report every day, how much screen time I've had. And it's just alarming to me sometimes. It's like, how have you looked into that or addressed any of the sort of 21st century things that are really affecting us in ways that are different from times past?
Surprisingly, yes. One of the things that we've tried to not talk about in the last year or so is still the effect of the COVID pandemic on a lot of institutions. You are right, Jim, and you know this well, that institutions change the world, the churches together, denominations, schools, groups of communities, people united. It's a powerful witness to the world. At the same time, during the pandemic, we did a project for churchsalary.com related to COVID in the church. We also did one for Preaching Today. And we found that churches were having pastors in particular, a very difficult time navigating this pandemic, where the state mandates were changing on a regular basis, and depending on where their congregations were, there was strong divisiveness in some congregations and fractures. We had people leaving the church, and we had strong arguments, people being let go, pastors feeling like this was the hardest year ever in their ministry. I just talked to a pastor this morning at a pastor's conference, and he's still feeling the effects of those years, and he's taking a small sabbatical this summer to renew and refresh. We still have some issues within our church related to, I think one of the things we don't talk about a lot is that the way that society and its concerns are overrunning, I think, a kingdom, a biblical worldview that we're following Jesus and this kingdom work that he is in the world. And so that's one of the things that I think is valuable again. And I'm encouraged because I start to hear now reports of some churches experiencing revivals and a renewed emphasis on community and smaller bodies of churches together. And I'm hopeful for the future. I feel like maybe we're in another period of renewal. I'm hoping.
There are many in kind of the long-term homeschool leadership who have often said that homeschooling and the institution of homeschooling as it grew organically is sort of a countercultural thing in America, where much of society is being kind of fractured and split apart. And I agree with you, the COVID times were very difficult for many, but that homeschooling, because it's led by volunteers and it's run by people who are, fully bought in and sold out, invested, and, just a whole plethora of ways that people do things to benefit their children and raise them in the nurture and admonition of the Lord is sort of countercultural in the sense of it's a building an institution as opposed to kind of fracturing. Any insight into that?
Well, it's a lot. I think one of the things that we find in the critique of public education often is, and this has been, historically a criticism from both sides of the political aisle, is that it teaches children to sit in rows and to perform. And I think the child-centered approach to education, the individuality is very important. And that's the richness of why we love homeschooling, isn't it? It's the thing that we get to focus on the child and help. And so, one of the loud cries from our research of parents in a local community is that about 20% of them just really would love to see a healthy mentor for their kid. They feel like their kid's lost in the system in some way, and they look for their child and they don't have a healthy mentor. That's something that's prevalent and might be a little bit countercultural, if you will. And the other thing is that surprisingly, one of the things homeschool co-ops can offer is the opportunity to really help children prepare for their next step, whatever that is. Career readiness and college preparation, whatever direction a student goes, isn't always, to a parent's view, something they get in return for their investment. And so I love this idea of this child-centeredness. And if that's countercultural, I'll take it. It allows for a high achievement. I was fortunate to be in a school system where in my elementary days, where we were in a small town, and teachers were able to step out and give us extra work. There were about 10 of us that kind of got tracked a little higher in those days. And I think that's what we're seeing, what I see with homeschooling and my grandkids and the kids in our community who are involved in homeschooling, kids who come to Bethel, is they have this sense of this enthusiasm for the future. I think that's contagious.
Yeah, that's something that, sort of the idyllic small town public school. And I grew up in a similar setting at different times of my life. But that is something that's sort of a bug in the public education system today, but it's a feature of homeschooling insofar as the customizable education that can match the child's actual skill levels and interests and pursuits, as opposed to sitting in rows and all advancing at the same time in the same way and all taking the same tests and answering the same questions. I think if I had been homeschooled when I was a kid, I was sort of one of those kids that I didn't do homework for like till I was in 7th grade because I could do it, while the teacher was doing and that was bad for me because I was not challenged, and led to the creation of kind of bad habits that if I had been able to kind of advance at my own pace and pursue my own interests, I think I would have been better off, a lot better off.
Take the other end of it, mastery education, for students who they have to work at it. And we just had a student in our extension studies program for whom, if you had gone off to a college that didn't have the mentoring that we had on this church-based education that we do at Bethel, which is very much like a homeschool approach, he wouldn't have been able to get a college degree because we didn't work with him over time for him to master the content. So, both the high achievers and the ones who need extra time benefit in this model.
Yeah, and that is the fallacy of the columns and rows approach to school. That is that in my job, I've helped a lot of people in sort of difficult circumstances at times. I'm a lawyer, and so you can probably guess what some of those difficult circumstances were. And oftentimes it was kids that were challenged that came to the attention of the authorities, and the education in the judicial system that has to happen is it's not right to take this kid at his ability level and compare him to other kids who have considerable more ability so we often put a case together by figuring out what this child's actual abilities are. And we can go into court sometimes and show that the homeschool education is actually helping this child who may have lower than average abilities perform and achieve and thrive up to his potential, which is all you can really ask for. You can never take a kid with a below average IQ and get them into the 99th percentile. It's just not going to happen. But you can get a child, every child to be interested and actively involved in their education and work up to their potential.
It's interesting. I went back. I moved between my sophomore and junior year in high school away. My dad's a pastor. And I went back because they were all my friends. I went back to the senior party right before their commencement just to hang out. And I was sitting with a guy named, we'll call him John. And he was just a kid that struggled through elementary school, junior high, came from a poorer family. Mom and dad were kind of absent and advocating for him with the system. And here he was at the end of his senior year. And I just had this conversation with him that was brilliant and articulate, very different from the man that I remembered, from middle school, the young man. And I just thought that the school system didn't serve him well. It didn't allow him to advance in ways because grades, who his parents were, all played a role in the sorting out that happened. And I don't know what's happened to him since, but even at 18 years old, I was struck by that.
I wanted to go back, and what you just said sort of reminded me. One of the really strong features of a home education for many, many children is the relationships that they have with their siblings and with their parents and with the homeschooling community. As you look at college students today, how many come kind of to college with good relationships back home, and how does that translate into the college experience?
Well, as you know, that's a wide-ranging set of answers for sure, and no one answer captures the majority of the audience that comes to school. But clearly, men and women are walking on campus with a range of I would say, in comparison. And I'm not one that thinks all the old days were the good old days. I did like the music of the 70s, but now it seems like they're coming to college still not sure about their identity. They're working on a lot of the things that we worked on when we were 16, 17, and 18 years old. And so when they come to campus, there is a wide range of fractured homes in the background, of inability to relate to others in a close proximity like a dorm, how to function together on an athletic team. And those are all great learning experiences for sure. I do think the richness of friendships is is a powerful thing. And this is where Bethel excels. And I don't mean to just talk about Bethel here. And I think Christian colleges in general, because they have RAs and RDs and dorms, and they understand that a certain percentage of the population is going to be homeschooled. They come from different backgrounds. And so we intentionally work on Christian community. I love Christian higher education. I'm friends with many people at many universities across the country, and almost all of them, if not all of them, work very hard at the dorm life, not just being about dorm, but about addressing the issues, Jim, you just brought up, about helping them learn how to relate to each other. And if you know an RD or an RA and they just went on for summer break, you got to send them a thank you card for the work they do. It's thankless. They don't get paid enough, but it's life-changing.
So my two youngest kids are just home from college. One of them was an RA at the athletic dorm, and the other was a TA in a design program. And I think my daughter, who is the TA, probably learned the most. Learned the most in the most pressure-packed way possible.
There's a strong relationship, I think, for Christian colleges, and I know, I don't know if parents listen to the podcast worried about how their child's going to do at Christian colleges. And I would say most of us are very conscious of the fact that a certain percentage of our population is coming from a homeschool background, and do everything we can to navigate that. And my experience is again, as I said earlier, homeschool students do just fine. It's a great environment on these Christian campuses.
Well, I agree. Several of my kids have gone to Christian college. A couple have gone to state college, and they did fine there too. Actually, the Christian schools, though, do have so one of my sons is actually on faculty at a Christian college, and it's just it is a different approach. There's a different sense of caring that students get, I think, when they go to that situation.
Yeah. And I mean, just as an aside, I did work for InterVarsity. My mother was involved in Navigators. There's at Purdue, where I went, Campus House is a local ministry. There are great support systems at state schools for students who want to thrive.
Well, what interesting things do you have on your docket coming up, either through your campus work or through Arbor research?
Yeah, thank you. We're very excited for how Bethel is trying to use technology and distance learning to meet the needs of students. I was just advising a student in northern Minnesota the other day, and she's already got an AA. She's already involved in ministry, very involved with her parents, was homeschooled, and wants to complete her bachelor's degree. And for her to leave her home area is not even on the cards, not even a possibility that she wants to do, but she wants a Christian degree. And so our extension studies program and our partnership with Youth for Christ and that endeavor allows her to do that. And I get very excited about that. As a former pastor, I love seeing students achieve their God-given dreams and realize their potential. And as a professor, I love that it involves an accredited Christian degree. The Arbor team is helping a lot of ministries, particularly we're working with some Christian camps this summer that want to know how they're doing now coming out of COVID. They're very not concerned, but they want to know that the resourcing they're doing are helping parents. And so we're doing a project there. We're doing a nice project on Bible translations across Africa, and to see how people are engaging scripture in multiple countries. We're excited about that. And then we're about ready to engage on a very large national project about something that we all carry with us in our life. And that's it's not a popular topic, but a lot of us in our adult days carry around a certain level of grief. And the stage theory of grief is coming under question. And we're going to explore how grief is lived out and how we handle it, and working with a couple of our team members on that. On the flip side, as I say that, we also have a team that's finalizing a project on joy. So, both ends of the human experience, I think, right there. And those are the things that I enjoy doing. It's not just about finding, today we're enamored with it. We get a percentage, like 53% of people do this, and then we don't know what to do with the percentage, and we don't know if that's unique. Was that true 10 years ago as a particular, is it true for all ages or just that group? And I think I love doing studies that answer the question, why, and we help ministries who want to peek around the corner and say, okay, where are we going? Why does that exist? And not just provide a number or percentage, but to say, okay, this is explanatory. This is telling you why this happened and what to do about it. And I think that's why I love the team that we have on Arbor. So we're excited for that. We have a couple of organizations that are doing, asking questions like, what are the challenges facing a certain group of people? And we do a series of surveys, focus groups, and interviews for them. So it's a very rich thing that we do. And a group of us work together on these every year.
So not to get too nerdy, but it sounds like what you do is more qualitative kind of research as opposed to quantitative.
My background is qualitative. I've taught it for years at the graduate level. I do have, we do statistics as well, but statistics alone tell part of the story. So we try to do statistics and focus groups, but you can do a lot of, with today's survey software, we ask open-ended questions and get some nice text in those surveys and can do a lot with it for sure. That's where I think that's where Arbor distinguishes itself, is at the end of the day, we help, especially Christian organizations, tell the story of the outcomes and the effect they're having. And that's where people appreciate what we do.
A question that I have, and this is me being totally selfish, but going back into the COVID and post-COVID, an observation, and this is just not 100% true, of course, but just a long-standing observation that homeschooling in America started 40, 50 years ago, very small, and over time it just sort of grew gradually, and as more and more barriers kind of were lifted, legal barriers and curriculum availability and things like that, it grew a little faster and a little faster and a little faster. But for the most part, the addition to homeschooling came about primarily because of parents, wanting something different for their children, and maybe coming into contact with other homeschooling families, and maybe being a little upset with what's going on in the school that they're in. But COVID changed everything in the sense that suddenly there was kind of this flood of parents who had their children at home, and the post-COVID world for people selecting into homeschooling is quite a bit different, because a lot of people who maybe never thought that they would homeschool had a taste of it, and maybe even tried it out, and maybe even if they've gone back to their previous educational setting, they always know now they can go do something different. It's a real thing that's in their ability to do. So for me, the qualitative study, or a study on how is it different? What did COVID do in changing the way today's parents choose education and educational options, and why do they do it as compared to maybe previous generations?
No, certainly anecdotally, you have to think COVID changed everything. And I like to use because we feel this at Bethel with our extension studies, it gave us permission to do a different form of education. Suddenly everybody did see, as you said, Jim, that, hey, this works. This isn't what I thought it was, right? And we can do this and this. I think the iPhone in 2012, most measurements changed because that's when the iPhone really took root and a lot of apps developed. And so there are a lot of differences there. I think we're going to see the same thing here in the COVID era with technology. And I think also a parallel value in American culture is entrepreneurialism. These younger parents want a lifestyle related to work that's got flexibility with travel. And so we don't talk about this enough, I think, but this is new. I was just talking to an entrepreneur that owned 5 businesses the other day. And he said, yeah, we're going to go, I'm in Indiana. We're going to go down to Florida here in a couple of weeks, or we're going to do this and that. And I said, and surprisingly, I said, oh, what do you do with the kids? We homeschool. And I didn't even know they were a homeschool type, but they had already turned that corner because they just wanted the control and to do it. And so that flexibility, I think also, and it's a privilege, thing to be able to do it. Not everybody can afford to do that. But I think that entrepreneurialism also, so technology, yes, the COVID pandemic, the entrepreneurialism / freer lifestyle also will contribute in there and allow people to try it and see the benefits of it. I think you're right.
Well, I'm going to leave the last word for you. Any final thoughts for this is an audience of homeschooling moms and dads primarily?
Well, I just want to be an encouragement to stay true to what you feel like God's called you to do. And I am a firm believer, as you can imagine, with the writing and the focus of what I do in education. I think education changes lives. In fact, I may get emotional a little bit, but I was reading through my journal. I went through a tough family period here recently, and I was journaling, and I wrote down the name of the Christian school I went to, and I said, that place changed my life. Education changed my life, and I think it's worth our best efforts for sure. And I was at HSLDA last year in Ridgecrest, just enjoyed the conversations around the lunch and dinner tables with people I met, coming up to the Bethel booth. Just what an impressive group of people who are your state leaders. They're involved in everyday leadership among many co-ops. And I walked away with just a richer picture of what's going on. And so we're happy to be back and sponsoring this year in Nashville. Excited to meet more people.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your sponsorship of our conference, your work at Bethel University, and the fascinating things you're doing through the Arbor Research Group. So, Dr. Terry Linhart, thanks for being our guest today.
Thank you, Jim.
And for those of you who are watching this podcast, we'd love to have you become a part of what we're doing here at Homeschool Legal Defense Association. You can bring these podcasts to the attention of your friends if you think that it'd be helpful to you and your friends. And also, if you'd like to be a member of Homeschool Legal Defense Association, we are an association and we are stronger because we stand together. You can go to hslda.org/join and become a member. You can also go to homeschooltalks.com/join and become a part of what we're doing here. So thank you so much again to Dr. Terry Linhart. And once again, I'm Jim Mason, President of Homeschool Legal Defense Association.
Every week, HSLDA hears from hundreds of homeschool families, many of whom are facing hostility from school officials or discrimination from colleges and employers. We've helped single parents facing criminal charges for homeschooling their children, families traumatized by wrongful CPS investigations, and even a grandmother harassed by the state for homeschooling her granddaughter. By donating to HSLDA, you can help make homeschooling possible for families like these and enable our work to preserve freedom for future generations. Give today at hslda.org/donate. That's hslda.org/donate. Thanks for listening to this episode of Homeschool Talks. If you've enjoyed this conversation, will you do us a favor by sharing it with a friend or leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts? As a reminder, you can find show notes for this episode along with our other Homeschool Talks conversations at hslda.org/podcast. And if you want to be the first to know about new episodes, as well as upcoming guests and topics, you can sign up for our email list using the link in the show notes. That's all for now. We hope you enjoyed this program, and we'll see you next time.